If you're like most people, you've noticed your grocery bill has gone up. On average, prices are going up anywhere from 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25 plus percent. In today's episode, you're going to hear from a leading expert who has made it her life's work to educate people on how to not only eat really, really healthy through a plant-based diet, but how to eat plant-based on a budget. Toni Okamoto has made it her life's work to educate people and teach them that you don't have to sacrifice health for budget. So stick around.
Are you ready to live the life you deserve? Do you want to feel vibrantly healthy and reach your optimal weight without dieting while being kind to animals and the planet? Then you're in the right place at the right time. Welcome to Plant-Based Eating for Health with your host, certified plant-based nutritionist, Kathleen Gage.
So, Toni, I'm thrilled to be talking about what you're an expert at, which is plant-based eating on a budget. And I have a Facebook group, I have a LinkedIn group, I have a couple of podcasts, as you know, because you're on the Plant-Based Eating for Health show. And I do a lot of outreach to people trying to raise awareness around the benefits of a plant-based diet. And as you know, a lot of people, as soon as they hear vegan or plant-based, they go, oh, it's so expensive. I couldn't do it because it's too expensive. And you've managed to really shatter that myth. So what I'd love to talk about today is how people can eat on a budget, why you wrote the books, how your books are doing so well, actually, what you're doing so that the books are selling so many copies and how many people you're reaching. So let's start with, when did you go plant-based vegan?
Well, it was a slow and very gradual process for me. I had never made the connection that the food that I was putting into my body would impact how I felt, how I moved. And I was an athlete and I would eat really unhealthy food. I would eat a lot of processed food, a lot of fast food. My high school was across the street from a Taco Bell. And I lived off of that. And I didn't understand why I would go to track practice and feel terrible. And it wasn't until my coach said, you got to stop eating this way. You got to at least cut out red meat, at least stop eating so much fast food. And I never had thought about that connection before, about how what I was putting into my body and how that was going to impact me as an athlete and as a just movement in general and feeling in general. And I started there. I cut out red meat, and that was huge for my family. They were very upset. They thought, how did I end up with this hippie kid? What did I do to deserve this? And it wasn't until I moved out that I became full vegetarian. And in community college, I joined a veg club and learned about what was happening in the dairy industry and felt really moved to make the switch from vegetarian to vegan. And since then, I've really been thriving. I've run a marathon. I've been healthy this whole time. I feel great. And it's been about 14 going on 15 years of being vegan.
That's amazing. Now, where did you grow up when this was all happening?
Sacramento, California.
American River College?
I went to Sacramento City College.
Okay, excellent. Because I actually used to live in Sacramento, and
cool.
My folks lived in Citrus Heights when they were alive, and so I'm very familiar with the area. But now I know your husband is vegan because he actually was on both my shows recently, and apparently you both were vegan before you met. So talk about from what he said, you sent him a message, he ignored you, and somehow if you haven't listened to the interview, you need to. But he speaks very highly of what you do and what attracted him to you, especially around health and fitness. So tell us about how you and Paul came to meet and, what the whole process there was.
Well, as he mentioned, we had met before and he had forgotten. And I had sent him a social media request on Facebook to be friends on there because we had talked for like 15 minutes and it wasn't at a vegan setting. It was at a concert. I met this random guy who happened to be vegan at a concert. And I thought, oh, let's be friends. And he ignored my Facebook request. And so years later, when we met again, he was like, hi, I'm Paul. And I was like, I know who you are. We talked for 15 minutes. And from there, we hit it off. It was vegan living that really brought us together. We met because we were passionate. We were at an animal welfare conference, and that was the foundation of our relationship. And we have since discovered many other similarities, like we don't drink alcohol, we don't even drink coffee. And those are really hard things to find, especially when you're online dating, which I was. And to find those similarities and to especially have a place in your heart that's very deep for the environment and for health and for wellness and for the animals is really special.
Well, I haven't had a drink in 37 years. I actually went into recovery 37 years ago because I didn't know what my limits were. And, people would tell me that's your limit. And it's like, no. But I actually, when I decided to go plant-based, and initially I wouldn't call myself vegan because I didn't want to be a crazy vegan. And about 6 months into the whole process, I actually was in the grocery store walking by the meat department and literally had a visceral response of pain, anguish, sadness. And what's really amazing is I have been involved in animal rescue for years, and yet I wasn't connecting the dots of here I'm rescuing animals on the one hand, because actually we have horses, chickens, dogs, and a cat that have all been rescued. And I had somebody say, well, how can you have chickens if you're vegan? It's like, we rescued them. We're taking care of them. They're given a good life. But it's so interesting how people don't connect the dots. So in the work that you do, and I definitely want to talk about plant-based on a budget, but in the work that you do, how do you educate people about the connection between their food consumption and cruelty to animals?
I've spent my whole adult life doing vegan advocacy, and I've worked at a farmed animal sanctuary, and I've worked at a vegan advocacy organization, and I really enjoyed helping people make those connections at that point in my life. But at this point in my career, I really only focus on food. I feel like me and plant-based on a budget are the first step. Maybe someone watched What the Health and saw me on there, and it's their first time ever thinking about maybe not eating meat, maybe lessening their meat, continuing to eat meat, but lessening it. And they're just stepping in. And so I really only focus at this point on the budget aspect, the health aspect, and the practical application in a life that has many obstacles.
So, the budget aspect right now is such a timely topic because a lot of people, due to the pandemic, lost their jobs. They've really had to stretch their money in ways that they didn't anticipate. And I know for me, one of the favorite recipes I have is a crock pot recipe. And I know you have a slow cooker cookbook, and I want to talk about that. But I have a favorite recipe that I actually cooked it for my sister, her husband, and my grandnephew when they came to visit recently. And for 6 people, it cost maybe $12 for dinner. And I mean, that's total, not each person. That was total. And when people say that they can't eat cost effectively by going plant-based, I really want to bring them information that shows them differently. So where do you start with people to educate them on the fact that actually a whole food plant-based diet is, one, healthier, and I definitely want to talk about that, but also very cost effective?
When I started Plant-Based on a Budget, it was a website that had a lot of recipes. And initially it was for my family who had those concerns, yet they were suffering pretty severe consequences of a standard American diet. And that led to death. It was very, very severe. My grandpa died from complications in a triple bypass surgery. My aunt had multiple amputations before diabetes claimed her life. And my 40-year-old uncle had a heart attack. These were very, very serious things that were happening. Yet something that I heard when I expressed how I was thriving on a plant-based diet, they regularly brought up the concern of cost. And so I, at the time, was living in a bedroom with two other people, had no car, had very little means, and still I was able to live a healthy life on a plant-based diet. So I started sharing my experience and sharing the recipes that I liked and that my family enjoyed, using ingredients that you could purchase anywhere. If you shop at Walmart and that's your place, you could still buy whole foods ingredients and make healthy meals on a tight budget. So that's where I started, with just simply recipes. But that wasn't enough. A lot of people had a hard time taking this recipe that is for a veggie stir fry, and this recipe that is for lentil tacos, and not being able to use all of the ingredients up across the week. So what I started to do was take the feedback that I was hearing and create meal plans that helped people buy a week's worth of food. My budget was $25, and I showed how you could stretch all of your food, use everything that you purchased, and eat healthy for a week for $25. That's $1.20 per meal. And that's actually how Plant-Based on a Budget really grew, is because I created those free meal plans. And then I created a premium meal plan, which was $5. So you purchased $5 and I gave you a grocery shopping list, information, and recipes, and laid it out. This is what you're eating on Monday. This is what you're eating on Tuesday. You spread out your leftovers on these days. And that's what people needed to actually try it out for longer than a meal.
Now, when was this? Because that's fascinating how, so much of what we do in the vegan plant-based world starts as just our passion. When I started my blog, it was just, I wanted to share information I was learning because I was shocked at what I was learning about factory farming, about health. And I started because of inflammation. I was 64 at the time and I was running, but I would get these terrible cramps in my legs. And I thought, okay, I need to find a solution to this. And everything that I read indicated that getting rid of meat and dairy would help me with the inflammation. Within a couple of days, it was literally gone. And I was like, okay, this is bizarre. And I had given up on diets. I was about, at that time, probably 35 pounds heavier than I am now. And I've been a yo-yo dieter all my life. I gave up on diets because I thought, obviously I'm meant to be old, frumpy, and fat. That was my belief at the time. And it was on a day that I felt old, frumpy, and fat. And what I came to realize was eating plant-based was not a diet. It was really a way of life, and then moving into the whole vegan thing. But when you started with these recipes, you did it just because people needed information, and now it's become your business, your branding. When did you first realize that with the information you were gathering and the people you were helping, that you could actually turn that into your business?
Well, I started in 2012. Mm-hmm. I started the blog in 2012. I created the free meal plans in 2013. And that's when I started getting some traction. And it wasn't until I was laid off from a job in 2016 and really hard up. I was interviewing for multiple jobs and wasn't having an easy time that I started focusing my extra time on Plant-Based on a Budget, trying to monetize for the first time so that I could just have some income. And I had a couple people, Paul included, and my friend Michelle, who's now my business partner. She and Paul really encouraged me so much that I began to think that this was a possibility for me, that if I invested my time and energy and switched from thinking this is a passion blog to this is a business, that I could make a living. And it was not a fun experience at first, but in addition to the encouragement that I received from them, I also was getting more and more people reaching out about how impactful having this information was, about how the free resources that I was providing made a difference to a mom who is living on one disability check, taking care of her husband and her children. And now they weren't even looking to eat plant-based, but they were looking to save money and found my meal plan. And that just made me feel so inspired to continue and made it feel like I've been trying so many forms of activism to promote vegan living. And this was one that I felt really good doing. There were some like protesting and others that I didn't really resonate with, but
Right.
this I felt good doing and I could see doing for a long time. And so in 2016, I started full-time in the fall and I'm about to celebrate 5 years.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I want to remind people you're listening to the Plant-Based Eating for Health show. This is Kathleen Gage, and I'm talking with Toni Okamoto, excuse me. And she is with Plant-Based Eating on a Budget. And, you mentioned that when you first started your business, it was not fun. Talk about that. What wasn't fun about monetizing?
A few things. One, I didn't know how to run a business.
Okay.
I knew how to run a blog and post whatever I felt like it, but to think more strategically really strained my brain. And I started talking to anybody who would talk to me about business. And I had never, so I mentioned I went to community college, but I didn't finish, I didn't transfer. And so I didn't have a college degree. And around that same time, when I decided to be a business owner, I went back to school for management at University of San Francisco and decided to finish my degree and hopefully apply directly as I was learning to my business. And I met someone who played a critical role in the early success of Plant-Based on a Budget. And he was a Patreon supporter. Do you know what Patreon is?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So for those who don't, it's just a fundraising platform. And I created a Patreon. I said, I really want to do this. I just need some help to get started. And he donated $12 a month for me to get started. And more than that, he offered to meet up with me and created a 3 and a 1, a 3 and a 5-year business plan. I created goals. We went over how I was going to monetize. I went over how, what my strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats are. And I didn't think about my blog like that before. And that was such a challenge for me to take a passion project and see how I could make a living from it when I had no income, and to look at my finances and to cut back everywhere so that I could make this dream a reality. And then the other part was that when you don't have resources, you can't hire help. Mm-hmm. And I did everything myself, even if I didn't know how to do it, or I relied on strangers to help me, which is sometimes it puts you in a vulnerable position. Like my website was hacked in 2013 or 2014. And I heard from a lot of people saying, hey, I can't reach your website. And I was saying, it's hacked. I'm working on it. And this random person was like, hey, if you give me the login information to your website, I can help you. This is my job. And I'm a Buddhist and I'm a vegetarian and I believe in paying it forward. And I really had to think, should I trust this person? Is this okay? And I did it. And he still works with me today.
Oh, what a great story.
Yep. Now I actually pay him. But at the time he volunteered, I wouldn't have been able to afford him. And he helped me recover my website. And it's just a lot of those types of things where you feel an intensity of stress when something breaks and you don't have the resources and you don't have the knowledge to fix it. And you can either borrow money or rely on a stranger to be a good person and not steal your website and actually help you out. So those are some of the reasons it's not fun.
Well,
first.
and I'm really glad you're sharing this, because a lot of times people will look at somebody like yourself and they'll look at your success. You've got a huge following on Instagram and you've been very successful with your books. And I'm an author myself and I know what it takes to market books. And, people will say, "Oh, you're so lucky," but they don't pull back the curtain and look at what it took for you to become quote unquote lucky. Now, with your books, what was the first book that you got published, and how did you find a publisher? Because I know that you're published by a publisher. A lot of authors, they rely on self-publishing because they can't find publishers. So tell us the journey there and what the books are specifically about.
Okay. First, that person I mentioned who taught me about business, I remember him saying something that really memory was triggered by something that you just said, which is, I think it's a Benjamin Franklin quote that is, "The harder I work, the luckier I get." And that is so true. I see so many people who it seems like they're lucky. It seems like they're a beautiful Olympian, and they're just talented naturally, but they work so hard behind the scenes to be as graceful as they are and as skilled as they are. And I'm sure you share how hard you work to create your books, to create your podcast, and there's just so much behind the scenes work that doesn't come forward to the light. To answer your question about cookbooks, I had no idea how to get a cookbook. The first cookbook, they came to me and as I mentioned, I didn't have any money. I had a very small savings and I was living my expenses. I needed to make about $1,200 a month to meet my bare minimum. I couldn't eat out. I couldn't go to coffee. If something broke, too bad. And I really, really needed money. And this publisher approached me and said, "Would you like to write a cookbook?" And they pitched me on an idea, which wasn't in my specialty, but I decided to work on it anyway. And it was super accelerated. It was 4 months. It was really 3 months, which we had extended to 4, to write a whole cookbook for slow cookers. And they were going to pay me a small, very small writer's fee. I negotiated $500 extra, which at the time I remember sitting with that gentleman I mentioned, and I had never negotiated payment before. And I felt so uncomfortable asking for more money. And I remember he helped me write something up saying, I really need a little bit of extra money. This is a big project. And I had a hard time pressing send. And he was like, "You can just press send." And so I pressed send, and they gave me the 500 extra bucks. I decided to get into contract with them. And it was a lot of work. I had no idea what writing a cookbook would be. It was that timeline made it a kind of miserable experience, to be honest, but I'm really glad I did it. I had the experience. I knew moving forward what I wanted, and that was representation. So I ended up trying to find an agent when I went into my second book. The first book did well. I got an agent, which was very hard. There's not a lot of information. At the time, there was not. This was 2014, 2015. When I started looking for an agent, there wasn't a lot of information that clearly talked to you about how to find an agent. And I was looking at forums, literary forums from like 2000 to try to get information on how to write a query, which is basically selling yourself in a couple short paragraphs to someone to represent you. And I reached out through, I got a subscription to Publishers Marketplace, which is something that can give you an idea about who's selling the most books and a range of how much money they're making for books. And I reached out to the top 10. I really sold myself, even though it was uncomfortable to only highlight. I have 2 paragraphs to punch in everything I've ever accomplished. Did that, interviewed with 10, and I'm sorry, reached out to 10, got 6 interviews, got 4 offers, and I chose 1. And then I went into the cookbook process. The cookbook process was harder than I expected to write what you do is you write a proposal. We wrote a proposal, me and my agents, and then we pitched it to a lot of the publishing houses. I flew out to New York and had probably about 6 to 7 interviews. And I thought, this is going to be great. I'm going to get so many offers that I'm feeling really confident. And when it came the day for bidding, which is what happens when multiple publishing houses are interested, I only got one offer, and it wasn't from it wasn't from one of the big publishing houses. And it hurt my feelings. And I thought, gosh, I worked so hard. I flew out to New York. I did all this stuff. I did everything I was supposed to do. And it was a humbling experience, but it ultimately ended up being the best thing to happen to me, because it was a smaller publisher, but they really, really invest in their authors. Unlike some of the bigger publishing houses, which kind of throw out a bunch of books, see which one picks up on their own, and then invest in the one that's doing the best. They really rely on authors to promote themselves. And I, at my publishing house, had a lot of support from their in-house team. I worked with one woman. She helped me get a lot of interviews and media training. And I just felt like they invested in me long-term. And so then when it came time to write the next book, I also went with them.
So I want to put a pin in that discussion, because I want to talk about when you got all the interviews and doing like you're doing right now. But before we do that, I'd like to talk about how people can actually get started on a plant-based diet or plant-based eating on a budget. And I want to remind people to go to Amazon, get your books, or go to your website. We'll put that in the show notes, because truly that is one of the greatest challenges that people deal with, is how do they extend their money nowadays, especially because, we're seeing this great divide where more and more people are finding that the $1,000 they had 6 months ago is not going as far. I went to the grocery store recently, and I get black cherries that I put in my morning drink, and pitted black cherries, and they literally went up by 25%. Now, when you look at the amount, it doesn't seem that much, but when you put it in percentages and that gets added to your grocery bill, if your grocery bill was $500 a month, all of a sudden your grocery bill is going to be $625 a month if there's a 25% increase. So it's really important for people to have strategies and systems and ways that they can stretch their budget. So how would somebody really be able to eat plant-based on a budget? And also, I want to encourage people to look at the short-term expense compared to the long-term expense. I recently broke my wrist, and I'm on Medicare because I'm over 65, and I also have a rider supplement to my insurance. But even with that, I still have had a lot. I've got one bill right here for $500. That's one bill compared to everything that I'm going to be spending on this wrist break. And so, I look at that, and it's like, people don't have the resources that they used to have. And with healthcare, if you can do anything to minimize your healthcare costs and the risk to your health, then we should do it. So let's talk about how people can eat on a budget with plant-based eating.
First, it starts with being really intentional about what you're buying at the store. And that starts with meal planning. And what I recommend first when you're writing up your meal plan is taking inventory of what you already have, and not going out and buying a fridge full of groceries when you have stuff already. Build your meal plan based on what you have. If you have a couple cans of black beans or a can of diced tomatoes, and you already have a couple spices, think about what you can do. You can do a soup, you could do a chili, and that will save you a lot and also prevent food waste. Food waste is such a serious waste of money. I know that I have the best intentions and buy fresh herbs and toss them because they go bad quickly. And so really being intentional, buying only what you need. I think we have this obsession with making sure our house is stocked when really you don't need to have a fridge full of veggies if they're only going to go bad and you're going to have to toss them. And if that means, say you travel a lot, if that means you focus more on frozen veggies, that's okay too. And so meal planning, then shopping with intention at the grocery store. Once you're there, stick to that meal plan. And also, when you're looking at prices, be really thoughtful about the marketing of certain items. Maybe you walk in and there are cans of Hunt's tomato sauce on display right when you walk in on sale. That might not be the cheapest tomato sauce. That might be paid for placement, like premium placement. If you go to the tomato sauce aisle, they will likely have a store brand, and that will probably be the cheapest. And to figure that out, you can easily see along with that Hunt's, because it'll be in the aisle, you will see the price per ounce. And that's what I'm looking at when I'm shopping. I'm looking at the price per ounce instead of the whole price, because you can get a can of tomato sauce that's 10 ounces and it may be $1, or you can get the 15-ounce can that's $1.10, and you automatically think, oh, it's $1, so I'm going to get this one, but you're getting less. So being thoughtful about what's being marketed to you, how they're figuring out their pricing, where on the aisle are things placed, because in marketing at the grocery store, sometimes people pay for premium placement at eye level, but if you look a little bit further down, there could be a cheaper option. So just be really thoughtful about where you're looking at the grocery store. And then when you come home, store your food properly. If you have those herbs, make sure that you're treating them like a bouquet of flowers, the same way you would cut off the ends and put them in water. That's how I keep my herbs a little bit longer, and I stick them in the refrigerator so that I have 4, 5, 6 extra days with them. And same with my lettuce. And I'm just really careful about when my bananas are going bad, not to let them rot on the counter, but to stick them in the freezer, slice them up, put them in a storage container and put them in the freezer so I can throw them into a smoothie later, and really just get the max use of the food that I'm buying, even if it's on its way out.
Those are great tips. And Toni, how do people reach you? What's your web address, and what would be the easiest way for people to find out more about you and about your books?
You can find me at plantbasedonabudget.com. And if you want to reach out to me, I'm most active on Instagram at plantbasedonabudget. And then at plantbasedonabudget.com, you'll find all my books.
Okay, excellent, because we'll definitely put that in the show notes. And I want to revisit the whole topic of marketing books, because as a marketer myself and an author many times over, one thing that I emphasize to authors, and especially in the plant-based industry and the vegan world, is you can't rely on the book to market itself. You have to go out. The writing of the book, and correct me if I'm wrong in your case, but the writing of the book is the easy part. It's the marketing and the selling and the getting the visibility. So with your books, if somebody were to pick one of, give us the titles of all your books, first of all. Let's start with that.
I've got the Super Easy Vegan Slow Cooker Cookbook, Plant-Based on a Budget, and the Friendly Vegan Cookbook. And of all of those, I mean, it's like, which one's your favorite kid? But I will say, if you're looking for fast and easy and cheap, Plant-Based on a Budget is going to be the best option.
Excellent.
And the Friendly Vegan Cookbook is more, the concept is food sharing with omnivores. So if you have a blended family and you're not really concerned about anything else except making sure that they're having a good dining experience, maybe you're hosting Thanksgiving or a barbecue, these are the things that I would serve to people who are in my own family and very skeptical about plant-based living.
Excellent. Excellent. Because when people come to visit, there is a rule that we don't cook meat in the house. And it's like, I'm not going to cook meat. My sister visited recently and she said, I'm going to bring ribs. And I said, not in my house. You're not. I said, it's not going to happen. And she said, well, you don't drink and you don't want alcohol in your house and you don't want meat. So which between the two? I said, if I had to pick between the two, bring the wine. I said, but do not bring the ribs. And she respected both. And I said, just come and have an open mind. Let me cook for everybody and have an open mind. And my 15-year-old grandnephew, he's actually looking at colleges already, and he's looking at University of Oregon. He's a quarterback and really good at what he does. And this is not just a proud aunt, but I watched some of his video and he's amazing. And we started talking about his performance. And I said, can I show you a movie that might encourage you to think about what you're eating? Oh. And we watched Game Changers, and that really triggered him. And then he has acne. And I said, is that something that you'd like to minimize? And he goes, yeah, definitely. And I said, can I show you another video? So first I got him with Game Changers on the performance side of things and all the athletes. And the next video I showed him, and I said, now be prepared. This one is going to shock you. It was Dairy is Scary. And 5-minute video, 2 minutes in, he said, I can't watch anymore and I will not eat dairy anymore. And so, what I have learned is meet people where they're at, but I also have very strict guidelines in my home that I will not cook meat for other people. It's just not going to happen. And so with the marketing of your books have done really well. And I encourage people, go to your website, Plant-Based Eating on a Budget. And we'll put all that in the show notes, because the reason I invite people on my show is I want to spread the word about the good deeds that you're doing, not only for people's health, but the animals and the environment. With your books, if you were advising authors on how to market, because now I'm going to pick your brain a little as an author,
please.
What are the top strategies for getting the word out about your books? You mentioned interviews. Are those media interviews? Are those podcast interviews? Are those magazine interviews? Yes, yes, yes. Or
yep, anything I could do. The book could come out. I will be promoting these books in 10 years. I've worked so hard on them, and I always wanted them to be evergreen content that I could promote forever. And when they came out, especially I would say 4 months, 5 months leading up to it, I started doing interviews, and I worked with, I reached out to a lot of social media influencers. I had help at my publisher, one in-house marketing person from my publishing house. And she reached out to her contacts in magazines and radio, food websites like The Kitchen and Real Simple and things like that. And then I hired somebody to pitch media. And she did media training for me and my publisher. If you ask your publisher, you never know what you could get until you ask.
Right.
And I asked for media training, and they said that they would split the cost with me.
Nice.
So I did media training, and I got a publicist, and that she only focused on in-person interviews at morning shows and at radio stations. And I did everything I could do. I had just gotten married, and I was like, see you later. The day after our wedding, I started my media tour, and I just focused hardcore only on as many opportunities. I didn't care if someone had 100 followers or if they had 1 million. I just wanted to share my book with anybody who would listen. And that was successful. And then with the next cookbook, we were in a pandemic, and that was a very different ballgame to not have the opportunities of in-person marketing. And then we really focused on social media marketing. And that's what I do anyway. That's my job, is in social media. So I thought about what I would want as a person with a platform. If somebody approached me, and they wanted me to promote their book, what would be attractive to me? And so we created very nice text, like a template that we would send to everybody. And it was like, we just want you to have a copy, whether it's digital or like some people got a digital copy. We really value the work that you do. And we meant it. We reached out to people whose work we valued and whose opinions we valued and sent them a free copy of our book and said, no pressure, like do it or don't do it. We just love your work and want you to have this. And that was probably the most impactful for that book. We reached out to a couple hundred people and a lot of them had pretty big following, and we were cold messaging some of them. Some of them had 500,000 followers or 1 million followers. And we were like, let's just try it. Why not? And we were surprised that some of those people said, yeah, sure. Send me your book and I'll happily promote it. And there are people like you who just want to share lift up other people and spread the goodness of the plant-based lifestyle. And so just asking anybody to help promote your book. I relied on my friends and family. I asked them, I sent out an email the day my book came out and I said, hey, reviews are really important. And this week is really important to me. I've worked for years to make this book a reality. Will you promote it on your social channels and also review it?
Wonderful.
And those little things, asking, like calling in every favor that you can that first week, especially of your book launch when Amazon comes out with your book, really makes a difference.
Well, you actually said one thing that I'm really glad you pointed that out, which is send copies of your book to get people to review it. Because it shockingly, I've had people ask me to review their book and I said, great, send me a copy, and they will send me a link to buy their book. And it's like, wait a minute,
no.
You're asking me to review your book.
Yeah.
And you want me to buy it. It's like one of the things that I work with my clients on, because I actually have a program on teaching people how to get on podcast shows. And it was one day on a run that the idea for this program came up, because I've been on, I can't even count how many shows I've been on. And I have my 2 shows. So hundreds of shows that I've done of my own podcast. And it came to me as I was on this run. I was listening to Lisa Nichols. I was listening to Hal Elrod. I was listening to a few big influencers, and all of them said it was the magic number for them when they were promoting a book was 100 to 150 interviews for the one book. And all of a sudden it hit me, the 100 Club, the 100. And so I actually created a program. It was right before the pandemic hit that was called the 100 Club. And it was a 30-day program where I would teach experts how to get on 100 shows. But what some people don't realize is you have to do the footwork. It's like, just because you say you want to be on 100 shows, it's not going to happen. So you really brought home the whole point that you have to work for what you achieve, for your success. And if you could give people one strategy for gaining visibility for the message they have around the vegan movement, the plant-based movement, what would the one strategy be? If they couldn't do anything but that one thing, what would you advise? I would advise something that I've worked really hard on, and I try to be polite and I try not to take advantage of people, but you don't get what you don't ask for. And I keep learning that over and over and over again. And so just to ask, build up the courage to ask someone. Someone just asked me if I could feature her on my Instagram. Just cold messaged me. Can you feature me? And I was like, I like your content. Yeah, sure. And I want to help her. And she had the courage, and I want to continue to encourage that behavior by giving her a place. So just asking, you never know if someone's going to say yes, even if they have 2 million followers, they might promote you. They might have you on their podcast. They might want to do an Instagram live with you. And that is probably the best thing, is just having the confidence, building the courage, and believing in yourself, and not taking it personally when people say no. They said no, you had a 50% chance. Wonderful. Well, I love that. You don't get what you don't ask for. And that is so true. And Toni, I have to say, this has been so delightful. I encourage people to go to your website, Plant-Based Eating on a Budget. And again, we'll put that in the show notes for people that are listening to this. Please go ahead and rate and review the episode. And also please subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. Toni, this has been delightful. Usually I have a 20 to 30 minute interview, and we're going on nearly an hour. more, it's because you are so incredibly fascinating. You've got the whole package, because you've got the marketing, you've got the content, you've got the books, you've got the lifestyle, you've got the husband who's doing the same thing. He's got a phenomenal business, and you've got that beautiful Pitty, and he's got his own Instagram page, doesn't he?
Yes,
What is his Instagram?
At Eddie the Pitty, EDDIE.
Okay, we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. We'll put some pictures of Eddie. And Toni, in closing, what are your final thoughts for people?
My final thoughts are always about plant-based eating. And if someone is listening to this podcast and is feeling really overwhelmed, just take it one day at a time. It doesn't have to be all or nothing at first. Just continue. If you mess up, that's okay. Continue moving forward. It's all about progress and not perfection.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. This has been delightful. And for everybody out there, I encourage you, go out, live healthy, eat consciously, and be kind. This is Kathleen Gage with Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. Have a great day.
Thank you for your commitment to an ethical life through plant-based food choices. The kind of choices that are kind to your body, the environment, and most of all, animals. Be sure to leave a review and rating of the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show.